Well, hello crafters and welcome back to the ScrapbookPal YouTube channel. My name is Deepa from Designs by Dee, and today I have this stunning floral card to share with you that I made using some Spellbinders products from the 4-Petal collection. Now, I specifically used the Thank You 4-Petal floral dies and the Make Me Smile Glimmer plate and coordinating dies, which both come together in one pack. So that's great to hear. And it has a fun feature, which I'm going to go over. So here are the Thank You floral 4-petal dies. You can see you get a big vine with a bunch of florals. I'm not going to use the vine and just the florals for this card. And here's the glimmer plate and the coordinating die that comes together. Now, the fun part about that is it cuts out everything and foils everything in one go. And then I'm also going to be using the LEAFY 3D embossing folder. So the first thing I want to go over with you is picking out your cardstocks for die cutting. So I've got some glitter and matte gold cardstock along with some different shades of like this light blush or peachy pink tone along with a darker blue. Now what I like to do is kind of go on my phone and look for an image. You can see this isn't a card, it's just a general image of something that I found that I like the color scheme of. And I basically take the colors from this image to decide which cardstocks that I'm going to use for my card. And because you see all the colors together already, you know that they're going to work well and they're pleasing to the eye. So that's my little trick for die cutting and making sure that your card turns out nice. So now let's go ahead and work on our background. So I'm going to be using this VERSAFINE CLAIR Twilight ink along with the LEAFY embossing folder. And I've got this blue cardstock panel, which is just a little bit smaller than 5 inches by 7 inches. Now you can see you have two sides of the embossing folder. One side has all the dips, which I call the valleys, and then one side has the mountains. So we're going to stick the paper on the side of the embossing folder that has all the mountains, okay? So everything's kind of raised. And then on the side that has the valleys, we're going to take our Twilight VERSAFINE CLAIR ink, which is really nice, highly pigmented. It's really deep colors, and it sticks nicely to that embossing folder, so you know you're going to get a good print with this. So now I'm just going to fold this over and run this through my die cutting machine with the embossing mat, and you can see it picked up all of that Twilight ink so nicely. Those leaves, they just stand out and pop out from the card because that darker ink in the background is really creating some nice contrast. So I noticed I missed a few bits on the edges, so I'm just going to do this again to make sure I've got ink over the entire background, and you can see it looks just stunning. Okay, we'll put that aside to dry. Now, if you're worried about ruining your embossing folder, do not. This is just plain ink. And remember, this is pigment ink, so this should come off without staining. It's not like you're using StazOn or anything like that. So the first thing I like to do is just put a towel down. I spray the entire folder with just plain water. Get off any of the excess ink. And then I'll go back in and I'll spray it with my ink removing solution. Okay, so the same solution that you use to remove ink from your stamps. Spray it, wipe it off a few times, and then what I like to do once I've got most of it off, just put enough water in each of the wells of that side that you put the ink on so that it's completely full to get all of the ink that might be in that weld portion, and clean it off again, and it usually comes out pretty much like new. You might have a little hint of color, but I wouldn't worry too much because you've got off that ink. It shouldn't come off onto any white paper. So now I just wanted to show you how beautiful this background is. You can probably just add a sentiment and be done. I could see this being a technique for mass production, but we are going to add the beautiful florals that come with the Thank You 4-Petal floral die set. So the next step here is to do a bunch of die cutting. So you've got all your different colors of cardstock. So that part of the thinking process is done. It's just a matter of cutting out all of the different layers. So there's a larger flower. There's like a budding flower, which has 3 layers to it. There's some smaller flowers along with some roses, which have 2 layers and leaves. And in order to make this a bit 3D and have more dimension, I'm using my stylus tool along with my foam mat just to shape these flowers a bit. Give them a bit, round them a bit at the buds and at the edges, just to make them look a little more dimensional. And then to add to the dimension, I did adhere these 3 layers of this flower together with some foam squares. They're thinner foam squares, so they're not going to make it, you know, too bulky if you're to send this in the mail. And you can see that dimension there. And for the roses, I just adhered that flat together with some liquid glue. So you only have 2 layers here. The back layer, some of them I did in some of that gold matte cardstock. Some of them I did in that peach shimmer cardstock. You can use whatever you like depending on your color scheme. Now the die that comes with this set cuts out 2 different roses. So you can cut out two of the roses at a time for each layer. And there's also one die which has all of the smaller little bits in it, like all the little detail pieces to add to your flowers that you can use as the centers of your roses here. So I've used some of that gold glitter cardstock in the center of those roses. And for the larger flower here, so this is the largest flower that comes with this set, there's only one die for this. And then you've got these smaller, that star kind of center there. And also I added just a small little bit in the center with the gold glitter cardstock just to give it a little bit of pizzazz. Like I normally don't use all of these extra little bits because I find it's a little bit tedious to cut them out, keep track of them, and put them all on. I normally just use gems in the end to add to the center of my flowers, but I thought today I'd go ahead and use the dies that come with the set. But that isn't an idea for you if you did want to, you know, kind of make it easier and not do as much die cutting. So I'm continuing with these smaller flowers now, and I'm using my stylus tool to add shape to them. Now, the end of my stylus tool here, I don't know what size it is, but they are the bigger or the medium sizes. And you can see when I kind of roll them out, the leaves at the back, and then push down in the center, the leaves pop up, and it gives it a bit of dimension. However, I went ahead and I changed my tip to the smallest ball here, the smallest stylus, and I noticed there's just such a huge difference. So when you push in that flower, it really pushes those petals up and gives it a lot more dimension than the larger ball. So it is important to use the right size stylus for shaping your flowers. Now let's go ahead, now that we've got all the flowers and leaves done, to do some glimmering. So we're moving on to the Make Me Smile set, and I told you this was really cool. They now have these transparent little sheets that they use to attach these to, which I find really helpful. It's easier to pull off, and it doesn't get the sticky stuff stuck on the back. Now I have one plate that I'm going to use, which is just so much easier to do to get a bunch of sentiments in one go. I'm using some Spellbinders matte gold foil here, and I'm actually going to foil this on some acetate. So I did contemplate using some white cardstock or maybe some blue cardstock that matches the background that we made with that embossing folder and ink. However, I thought I didn't want to cover it up, so the acetate was the best way to go. So I've added my plate on here. I'm cutting off the excess foil, and then I can go ahead and heat up my Glimmer machine and put that through after the timer through my die cutting machine to add pressure, and you can see it foils ever so nicely. Now all I have to do is line up this one die and cut all of these out in one go. Now I did forget to mention, if you are foiling on acetate, make sure you use heat resistant acetate, because if you don't, your acetate's going to melt and you're going to have a big mess on your Glimmer machine. Now when you do go to cut this, I'm showing you that my plates are really cut up, so there's a lot of pieces of paper and stuff stuck in it. Do use a scrap piece of paper before you cut your acetate, because otherwise it tends to ruin the acetate. And you can see here that everything is nicely cut out. You will get a cutting of that scrap paper that you use. Not a big deal. You can just remove that. And you can see how nicely this looks on that background. So here are all of the sentiments. I pulled them all out of the negative piece there. You can pick any which one you want to use. You can use a couple, use one. I love that there's like that choice there. I don't have to pick one sentiment to foil and use. So now that I have all of my pieces, let's get to the assembly portion of this card. So I wanted to get my sentiment done first so I can kind of place it on my card and know where I want to place all of my floral die cuts. Now I'm placing those 3 larger flowers in the center of the card, and what I want to do is have kind of like a sweeping floral coming from one corner to the other diagonally. Now I'm pretty much just placing my flowers where I think I want them to go. I don't always show this in videos, but I think it's an important part of the creative process. So you can see I'm moving the flowers all over the place, kind of getting the look that I want. At first I was going for more of a wavy look, but in the end I settled for like a small band which becomes wider in the center. So really for this card, my color scheme worked out exactly as I thought it would. However, the way that I wanted the front panel to look kind of changed a little bit, and that tends to happen with the creative process. So now I'm placing the larger flowers on with some foam adhesive. Again, that's giving it a bit more lift, and I find that it just sticks better, especially when you're using a background that has been 3D embossed like this one has. It's a little hard when using liquid glue to get it to sit flat, and that foam just gives it a little bit of play so that, you know, it will stick in some areas and kind of fold down onto the grooves and nooks and crannies of your embossed background. So now that I've got the main florals attached to my card, I kind of want to fill in a little bit of the background with the petals. So I'm going to do this in 2 steps. So I've got my main flowers on. I'm adding the petals to fill in the little spaces between those flowers and on the edges. And then I added those roses you can see. Now, finally, to fill in all the gaps, now that I've got all my main flowers on, I'm using those small little 4-petaled flowers. Perfect, right? It's the 4-petal collection. You know, that only happened because I just took a sip of coffee and it just kicked in now. Yeah, the 4-petal collection. These cute little 4-petal flowers, I've got to say, are just beautiful. I could see using these, and I've done this before, and it turns out really nice. If you just cut out a bunch of these small little flowers, and cut out some letters like hi, or even just like a main letter for someone's name, and then just put these flowers all over that solid letter to have a floral letter on your card. I think it looks absolutely stunning, and I think that's maybe something I'll do next. It's funny how when you're creating, you kind of get sparks of ideas for another card, and then you can go ahead and make that. Okay, so back to this card. You can see that all of the flowers are pretty much placed on the card. I have a few extras just in case. And then I've placed all of the extra petals down as well. And to fill in any extra bits, I did add all of those small 4-petal flowers. Now, once that's done, I want to go ahead and attach this to my card base. I've cut a 5-inch by 7-inch card base. And you can see that my initial panel was a little bit smaller, so I get a border around here. If you want specifics, I would say that panel was 6 3/4 by 4 3/4. So you get a nice border around there. Now that that's on there, I can add my sentiment. Now you're wondering, oh no, it's acetate. How are you going to add this? So this is my trick. Tiny little dots of glue, tiny little dots of liquid glue just behind your foiled sentiment is what I use. You're not going to need too much because remember, I'm sitting this flat on the card and there's lots of raised edges. There's a bunch of edges that are going to pick up this piece of acetate, so it'll stick nicely. Now remember to use glue that dries clear. I'm using some of this Barely Arts glue. I find it always dries clear. I don't have any issues with it. Tends to work well. You can see the glue right now. I'll put my acrylic block on top and let that dry, and it'll dry clear. And you won't notice any glue or adhesive at all. Now to jazz this up and make it sparkle a little more, I'm adding some PINKFRESH Studio embellishments. So I've got, I think this is the blush glitter drops, and then I also have the iridescent clear drops, which are my favorite. Now for the blush drops, I'm adding them just in groups of 2 and 1, just coming out, kind of radiating out from the flowers. And then once I've got all of those glitter drops where I think I want them, I'm going to go ahead and switch those out for some of the iridescent drops. And these I'm going to use for the center of those 4-petal flowers. So there's, I think, about 4 or 5 sizes in this pack. I'm using the smallest size to go in the center of all of these little flowers. And when you actually tip the card in the light, you'll see all of that shine from the glitter drops and from these iridescent drops as well. And there you have my card for you, featuring the 4-petal collection by Spellbinders, available in the ScrapbookPal store. So everything I've used today is linked within the description below. You can go ahead and click on the links and shop to your heart's content. If you like this video, go and hit the like button, and please do subscribe and hit the notification bell to be notified of future videos. I hope you guys have a great day, and I'll see you again next time. Bye.